guys, thanks for checking out the video. Today we're going to be doing a really fun project that brings me back to my roots when it comes to woodworking and just crafting in general. I often am approached by people saying, you know, how did you start out? How did you discover that you had a knack or a passion for making things? And really for me, it all started when I decided to customize my knife. Now this is a K-Bar Becker BK16, and it's a great knife, but when it comes from the factory, it comes with a black finish on it and black plastic handles, and it's not really my style. And so I decided to update it. I stripped it off. I did this forced patina on it, which I think turned out great. And then I added these snakewood scales and some mosaic pins, and really just kind of made it my own. I love the way that it feels, and I love the way that the knife performs in general. Whenever I'm out in the woods, this is always with me, and it's a great knife, and really kind of opened me up to woodworking projects and just crafting projects in general. And so I started making a bunch of other knives. I made a knife for each of my brothers, made a knife for my dad, and really just kind of got into it. This is another example of a knife I made. This is some synthetic horn and some stacked leather with a hidden tang, and this is a fun knife. I use this in the shop all the time. It actually sits right here in front of me. This one here I made for my wife. This is some stabilized maple burl scales on some, I think this is 1095 steel. It's a great knife, but sadly, my wife doesn't use it. She doesn't like the knife. I don't know if it just doesn't fit her or what it is. So we're going to do a little bit more discovery in that. And we're going to try again to see if we can get this next knife that we're going to make for her really fit her. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at the different materials that we're going to need to put this project together. Obviously, the first thing that we're going to need is a knife. And so I went ahead and ordered this knife blank from Condor. This is the Condor Bushlore, and it's 1075 carbon steel. It's one of their bushcraft type models, and it's got a nice Scandi grind on it. We're definitely going to have to make some adjustments to it to make it fit her, but I think it's a good starting point. I've also got some brass pins that we're going to use to attach the knife scales. And then I presented a bunch of different materials for the handle to my wife, different types of wood, different types of synthetics, and out of everything that I presented to her, she actually chose black walnut. And so this is a piece that I had just sitting around the shop, and what I did is just take it over to the bandsaw and open it up, and inside I found all these beautiful colors, and that just got me super excited. So let's go ahead and get started with this project. All right, so for these knife scales, which I don't know why they call them scales instead of handle or whatever else, but they're knife scales because knives are cool like dragons, I guess. Anyway, so we wanted to dodge a couple of things. So as you can see here, we've got one of the branches that was coming through the wood here, and we've got a little bit of pith, which we definitely don't want on the knife. And then on this side over here, we've got a little bit of a crack on this side where two branches came together, and also a little bit up here that we're going to look to avoid as well. So let's see what we can do to get this knife laid out on here in a way where we can kind of avoid those areas and still get this really pretty color. Okay, we've got our knife scales rough cut out. You'll notice that there's quite a bit of room on these. As you put the knife on there, you can kind of see the wood all the way around the edges. The reason for that is we want to make sure that we've got enough here that we're not going to end up with any problems putting things together and it ends up being something like this. We'll end up taking this extra material away when we move over to the sander, and everything will be sanded together and more uniform. So that's all ready to go. In addition, we also got our liners in. Now we've got these white ones here that are 0.6, and we've got our blue ones, and these ones are 0.4. And the way that we're going to stack this up is if we take the white one, and then a blue one, then the blade, then a blue one, white one, put it all together. This is going to be our kind of basic idea here. And I think that that is going to look pretty awesome, where we go from the wood to the white to the blue to the steel. I think that it'll look really nice. The first thing we've got to do is we've got to get these pieces of wood really nice and flat. So as you can see, holding them up to the knife blade, that there's just, they're not quite flat. So we're going to get those nice and flat, then we're going to start drilling some holes. So before we move on with the handle, I want to address just a couple of items with the knife blank itself. This is 1075 high carbon steel, and I want to go ahead and put a forced patina on it to help protect it from rust. So simply put, we're going to be forcing the patina process. Now, a patina is a thin layer that builds up on metal over time that then protects it from rust and other corrosion and things like that. And since this is not a stainless steel blade, it's a good idea to do that just to give it some additional protection. We're also going to want to do some cleanup around this edge here where it came a little rough from the factory, and just some overall cleanup in general. So let's go ahead and get into that. Okay, so what I've gone ahead and done is got this piece of plywood and then clamped the knife to that, and I positioned the knife here kind of off the side of the edge. That will allow me, as I'm going ahead and sanding, that I'm not going to slice my hand open on the edge here. So we'll go ahead and start on the top portion of the knife and then continue with the bevels. Okay, now that we've got everything sanded up where we need it to be in preparation for the patina, we'll go ahead and wrap up that blade to make it a little safer and continue working on the handle. We'll get everything kind of pre-shaped and get our holes drilled. So let's go ahead and get our handle material. So here's where double-sided tape works awesome, as it'll allow us to get all of our handle materials put together, stacked up into place, and then we can start drilling holes, making cuts like this, and everything will kind of stay together before we go ahead and put the epoxy on. All right, let's go ahead and head over to the drill press and start drilling these holes out. Okay, now that we've got the holes drilled on one side, we've gone ahead and added the other side, again with the double-sided tape. And what we'll do is flip things over and then drill through the same holes we've already drilled, and this will act as a guide to help keep everything nice and straight. Alright, now that our holes are drilled, we can go ahead and add our pins. Now, originally we were going to use brass for that, but after looking at things, it didn't really have the look that we wanted, and so I went ahead and picked up some copper pins and feel like that's going to be a much better fit. So we'll go ahead and add copper in the first two holes here, and the last hole we'll add in a tube in order to allow for a lanyard. So let's go ahead and get our pins cut and in, and then move over to the sander. Okay, now that we have everything roughed into place, we'll go ahead and remove the blank. This will allow us to go ahead and work on this top section here without having that knife in the way. So let's go ahead and do that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and completely finish this section here. The reason for that is once the blade is sticking up out of there, we can't get into this section for sanding without wrecking the side of the blade. So this has to be completely finished before we put everything together. Okay, so what I just noticed is that there's this teeny tiny crack right here, and the reason I've been able to notice it is because it's filled with the sawdust. So what we're going to go ahead and do is blow that out, get some CA glue, fill that hole, and then we can get going forward. Alright, now that we've got the top of the handle all finished, we can go ahead and drill the hole for the lanyard tube, and from there we can get started on the patina. Okay, so for the patina, we're going to go ahead and expose the blade to some acid. Now the acid that we're going to be using is just simple over-the-counter stuff, and we're going to start off with some yellow mustard and then use some white vinegar to finish everything off. So let's go ahead and get to that. Alright guys, so I'm super interested to see how that's going to turn out. I think it's going to look pretty neat. So let's go ahead and get this up on a block. We'll flip it over and do the other side just to make sure that we don't mess anything up that's already been done. Alright, so I think that's going to give us a fun spotted look. As you can see on this other side, it's already starting to darken up, and I think it's going to look pretty good. So let's go ahead and let this rest, and we'll go from there. Alright, now that we've got this nice mustardy crust on here, that's something I never thought I'd say, we'll go ahead and get this whole thing into the vinegar and let it soak. Okay, we let that soak for about a half hour now, so let's go ahead and wipe off our mustard and see what we got. Alright, we've got those nice spots that we were looking for, so now what we're going to do is go ahead and put the whole thing back into the vinegar to allow the spaces between the spots to darken up as well. After letting it soak in the vinegar, I went ahead and added a little bit more mustard just in a little bit of a swirl pattern for our top layer, so let's go ahead and get that cleaned off and see what it looks like. Guys, it turned out so good. After a quick wash in the sink, this is what we're left with, and I have to say I am super happy with this pattern. I love the way that it looks. I love how you can see the dots and then the swirls that are on top, and then as you kind of move through the different angles of light, you can see the different patterns. It just turned out really good. So let's go ahead and start with just a quick cleaning on the top of this, and then we can start getting our scales on here. Well, I guess that's what happens when you get acetone on your mat. Okay, so now that everything's cleaned, we're going to go ahead and start preparing these to receive the epoxy. Right now they're really smooth and need to be roughed up a bit so the epoxy has something to grab onto. So what we're going to do is take a Dremel bit, this one right here, and just go ahead and make some little marks on there. Now one thing really important to remember when you're doing this is not to get too close to this edge. If you do, when you start sanding things down, you'll go ahead and see those divots in the liners or in the scales. And so it's important to stay well away from that edge. Okay, so now that we've got everything set, we're ready to move forward. Now, working with epoxy, especially one like Gorilla's here, it's a 5-minute epoxy, which means you have 5 minutes to have everything in place before it starts to set. And so it's important to have everything laid out so that you can move quickly and get everything in place. So let's go ahead and get this mixed up and get everything on the blade. Okay, so now we'll go ahead and get this whole thing wrapped up and get the clamps on and let it set. One thing to note is that it's really important to get any excess epoxy off the blade to make sure that it doesn't cure on there and give you problems later on. So it's been about an hour, so let's go ahead and get this out of the clamps and over to the sander. Alright, now that we have the overall shape kind of roughed in, we'll go ahead and start adding some of the details. We're going to start with this finger groove up top here. We got to bring that in a way so she can get her hand all the way around the knife and it's more comfortable for her. From there, we'll go ahead and start bringing the sides in just to make things more rounded and more comfortable. And then for the top, we're going to leave it relatively flat, but we are of course going to round those edges just so that she has a nice firm grip on it. Okay, now we've got the knife over in our setup here, so we can go ahead and start filing. From there, we'll go ahead and start sanding and get this thing finished. Okay, now we have things sanded up to 400 and things are feeling really nice. We're going to go ahead and start sanding with some double-aught steel wool and mineral oil just to kind of raise the grain and make sure everything's looking nice and smooth there. It's looking pretty good. Now let's get it sharpened. Okay, so we've got the knife here set up in my Lansky sharpening system, and we're going to be adding a secondary bevel to this Scandi grind. What this will do is allow us to give it a little bit more support to make sure that things aren't getting too thin and things going to chip off and break or anything like that. So we're going to be starting with our coarse stone and going all the way up to our very fine and give us a nice sharp edge on there. And I have to say, I really like this system. It's just a solid system for maintaining the angle and gets the blade razor sharp. So let's go ahead and get sharpening. Alright, I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but we're hair popping sharp. It's time to see what the missus thinks. Alright, we finished the knife. You ready to see it?
Yeah.
Okay. Ta-da! What do you think?
That's not my knife. That's my old knife.
Sorry. Okay. Let's try one more time. Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Ooh, I like it. Can I pick it up?
Yeah, of course.
It's nice. I love the blue.
What do you think? How does it feel in the hand?
I love this.
Yeah, the pattern on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels good. It feels nice. Feels like I can go out in the woods and do some carving.
Perfect. Well, all right. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We'll leave you with some close-up shots, and we'll see you on the next video.